Hello, this is Mary Jo Tinlin from Teaching Your Toddler. Welcome to our show. Today is a very special day for us, not just because we have a great and brilliant author on our show, but also because it is our 100th episode of the show. I'm so excited today to talk to Stephanie Nelson. She is a New York Times bestselling author of a new book called Imagine More, Do What You Love, Discover Your Potential, which is out now from Thomas Nelson Publishing. She is also the creator of the Coupon Mom website, which launched in 2008. She became known as a savings expert and appeared on both national and local television as that expert mom, including Good Morning America, Today, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. She also has another book, which was a bestseller, called The Coupon Mom's Guide to Cutting Your Grocery Bills in Half. And she has a podcast called Pivotal People. Today, we're going to talk about how you can find your purpose, or maybe your next chapter, or whatever those gifts are that you've been given. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and what is in her book that will help you do that. And so stay tuned. You're going to hear some amazing things that will help you as a mom, as a person, as any kind of person that is just getting ready for the next thing in their life. So join us now, and welcome to the show. Hi, this is Mary Jo Tinlin from Teaching Your Toddler, and today we are welcoming Stephanie Nelson to the show to talk to us about her new book and also about reinventing yourself as stay-at-home moms or new moms or moms with any kind of child. I know we all sort of go through those time periods where it's like, gosh, what is my life really like? And so, Stephanie, first tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's talk about your book and about reinventing yourself.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. I understand this is your 100th podcast. That's very exciting.
Gosh. Yes, thank you for saying that. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the other connection is that you and I spoke a million years ago in the early days of this whole brand, Teaching Your Toddler, when it first started, and I first started the website. It was I was doing a lot of, I was actually working for another website called Family First. And so I interviewed you for that. That was sort of the beginning of my journey as a content creator. And so I'm loving that for our 100th anniversary, we've sort of had this bookend of like the beginning of the career to here we are at this milestone show. So thank you for mentioning that also.
Oh, I love that. I'm honored to be here for it. So
that's great.
So yes, so I'm a mom, and I have two sons now who are 27 and 30. But 23 years ago, when I started at the Coupon Mom website, which was teaching people how to save money on groceries, but also trying to encourage them to donate food to charity. And that piece, actually, the donate food to charity piece, is how it started. I added the how to save money on your family's own groceries to attract people to the idea of donating food to charity. But I can really relate to your audience, because when I had this idea, I love to use grocery coupons. 23 years ago, I went and I heard a speaker at our church, and she said, if there's something you love to do, pray about how you can use that to help other people. And I'm one of those people, you don't want to get stuck behind in line at the grocery store, the woman with all the coupons. And that's a fun game. And that is what was just top of mind. God, I really love to save money with grocery coupons. Surely there's a way for me to use this to help other people. And I started to pray about it every day. But I had two little boys. I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'd quit working to be a stay-at-home mom. That was not in our family's financial plan at all. Because, it's not until you have a child that you really know how you're going to feel.
Right.
So I convinced my husband that if I quit working, that I would be on we drill it down to a super tight budget, and we could make it financially. And so, to his credit, he believed. I actually made a PowerPoint presentation about it. And I will say, I kind of exaggerated the assumptions, but at any rate, the grocery coupons made a big difference. But so I started to pray every day, how can I use this? And on day 11, I am at our church, and on the church bulletin, they had an appeal for food donations for our local food pantry. I didn't even know there was a local food pantry. I was so naive. I didn't know that hunger was an issue that people in my suburb faced. But what caught my eye was that every item on the list was a coupon item. So I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. And so the next day, I went to the grocery store with my coupons. I got the stuff on the list, and I got $60 worth of groceries at a cost of $10.
Wow.
Now
Wow.
that was really my light bulb moment. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
So I take the food to the food pantry with my kids. You just can't leave them at home when they're that little. And we sat and we waited in the waiting room because I wanted to talk to the director of the food pantry to tell her this brilliant idea so she could somehow grow it. What could I do? I didn't. So she didn't have time to see me. She was seeing clients all day. And what happened to me was probably the best thing, because what happened to me was I looked around that waiting room and I saw other moms just like me with little kids just like mine. And the only difference was that we were in different situations. Okay. It still gives me goosebumps when I think about this. When they've worked all day long, you could tell from they were dressed more nicely than I was. They've worked all day long. They're stopping at the food pantry to get some food before they go home. My pastor says, when you're looking where you can help, just pay attention to what breaks your heart.
Oh,
Because,
wow. That's
yes,
profound.
if something breaks your heart, you really don't have to work too hard to get motivated.
Well said. Yes.
So I go to the car. I go to the car in the parking lot. I never did see the director. And I just felt like God's telling me you should buy food for charity every day. You think it's fun anyway. I mean, how great is this? So we started collecting coupons at my church. They put a collection box. People would bring their Sunday coupons. And let me back up a little bit. This is the year 2000. Coupons are so unpopular. I honestly didn't know another friend who used them the way I did. It was just not, I mean, it became popular. They became popular in 2010. This is 10 years earlier.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I tried to get women interested in using coupons, and I would invite them to my house and I would explain how this worked. And they were so confused. So finally, my mother said, you know what? Don't try to teach us to figure it out like you can figure it out. Just give us a list of what the best deals are that week. Okay. Well, wow. All right. I could do that. It didn't occur to me to do the figuring out for people. So one thing led to another. We did it every week. Pretty soon I had 25 women. I'm making these custom lists, and it was getting cumbersome. And my pastor said, why don't you just start a website and put those deals on the website every week? And then anyone in the state could actually use that information.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I did. And it cost me $35 to start a website on dial-up internet.
Yep.
Yeah. And, it was just grassroots. And I would take my older son would go to kindergarten, and my younger son, I would go speak to women's church groups, and he would just sit at the little table. He loved it because there was always a buffet, a Chinette plate and a buffet. He could pick whatever he wanted. And they would go shopping with me, and they would, see the coupons. We would take the food to the food pantry. And I heard an expression I really loved years ago, which is children learn by what's caught, not taught.
Oh.
So my sons couldn't help they couldn't help but see that what we do in our family is we buy food and we donate it to charity. I never sat them down and gave them a little lecture about that. And over the course of their life, it's interesting to see now that they're in their 20s. I was with my son in a restaurant. He was in his 20s, and he had noticed when we were going into the restaurant that there was a homeless man outside. So we had our meal. He had a big sandwich. He ate half of it, and then he asked for a to-go box, and he got the other half. And when we walked out of the restaurant, he walked a block to hand the sandwich to the homeless man. I have never done that. I didn't teach him how to do that. I just, we have to remember our kids are paying attention to everything we do. And if we really are sincere about it, and if we really are authentic and it's part of our life, they will learn it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Well, the book that you wrote is called Imagine More, Do What You Love, Discover Your Potential. And you alluded to it in the beginning, just a minute ago, when you were talking about, talking to God and bringing it to him and helping and letting him show you. But then you also had some things like the situation in the food pantry. But I also read about when you were trying to start your website, you had some issues with the IRS and had some rejection and things like that, right? So how did that adversity sort of help you, see bigger things or better things?
Well, I think that's such a good question, because people tend to look at success stories and they think, oh, well, look at that. Everything just went so perfectly well. I actually wrote this book I'm 60. And when I turned 50, I kind of thought, the best years of my life are behind me. My kids are grown. So that job is done. By the way, it's not done. All right. 10 years later, I'll tell you it's never done.
Their problems get harder too, by the way, don't they? As they get older, bigger problems.
And sometimes the wonderful things too.
Yes,
Your
yes, of
your kids
course.
just call you to talk to you,
Oh,
as their friend, as
yes.
an adult. But I wanted my sons to understand the backstory. Just my sons. So I went to a writer's workshop. I learned how to write a book. I got a coach. I didn't intend to publish it. It's very hard to get a book published, by the way.
Mm.
So I just thought, maybe I won't, by the time my sons are interested in this story, I might not be here anymore, but I want it in writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's another story, but a publisher came to me and they published it. And now my sons have both read it because it's a real book between two covers.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the whole idea was, my older son is a business analyst and he is 30, and he read my whole story, the backstory, the rejections, the challenges, the failures. And he called me up and he said, Mom, I didn't realize all of this. It's an unbelievable story. And so the story I wanted people to really understand is that I never did a big thing, first of all. It looks like a big thing. It ended up being a multi-million-dollar business. It ended up, being national. It ended up helping a lot of people. It was a free service. We never charged the people a fee to use it. It made me so happy. And it started with a prayer. Lord, please show me how I can use what I love. But as I was going along in the first 3 years of trying to get this thing off the ground, it really didn't catch on very much. Just grassroots right around my immediate community. And I had a dream that it would be something people would use nationally, because it was available nationally. It was free. We just had to get people to learn about it. I didn't have any staff and I didn't have any money. And anyone who has a business knows that the way to grow it is marketing people, PR people, a computer programmer, all kinds of things. And I just told you, our family was on a budget. So my pastor said, well, if you were a 501c3 nonprofit organization, you could get grants. I thought, well, okay, that makes sense. So our church accountant, took me on as a pro bono client, submitted an application for this project to get grants. And I got a call from the IRS agent, and this was the greatest rejection I've ever had in my life. This I thought was a shoo-in. And they said, no, you don't qualify. And they had a reason, which ended up just PS. The reason was wrong. So if we had contested this, we would have become a 501c3 organization. But I'll tell you what, when the IRS agent called me, I actually cried on the phone.
Oh.
The woman felt so sorry for me. She said, you know what? You can withdraw your application so there's no record of this rejection. We can do that for you. And then later on, if you want to apply again, maybe it'll go through. So we withdrew the application and I never did apply it, because here's what happened the very next day. I was so heartbroken over this that I'd never done this. I closed the door in my bedroom Sunday night at 9:30. I got on my knees next to my bed and I asked God to take this obsessive drive away from me. I said, I'll keep doing the website, because there were people who loved it locally who used it. It's not enough to make any, critical mass to be able to sell ads or anything like that. But I I could continue doing that. I loved it, but just to stop driving everyone crazy, trying to have this thing be national.
Mm-hmm.
And, whenever we go to God and just like throw it in front of him, just doing that, you feel more at peace.
Yes.
And so I thought he was telling me, I thought this was like God's message to me, that what I was doing wasn't the best thing, that I'd be a better mother if I stopped doing this project on the side and just really paid attention to my kids more. That's how I felt, because we do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have something of my own, I should just
Mm-hmm.
be so focused. By the way, my kids both turned out well, in spite of the fact that perhaps I spent a lot of time on my project. So the next morning, I got a phone call, and it was from a man I knew at a PR agency. And he said, "How did you get Clark Howard to talk about your website on the radio?" And Clark Howard is a national financial expert, but I live in Atlanta, where he is based. In Atlanta, everybody knows Clark Howard, and everybody knows that Clark Howard is extremely ethical. He will not take any money from companies. He will not do sponsorship deals. So if he recommends something, you can trust it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my website went crazy. And then
Wow.
the PR guy said, "Hey, you got to use this. Call up the local TV stations and tell them that Clark Howard's talking about your website. They'll have you on." And so I did.
Wow.
And they did have me on. And the day I went on local TV, I met a man who was another guest on the show. And he loved the whole concept of you can use coupons to get free food for charity.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, this has to go on national TV. And he essentially got me on Good Morning America.
Wow.
And that changed everything.
Yes.
As soon as it went on Good Morning America, and I just thought the financial person on Good Morning America would recommend my website.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was hoping for. But I was a regular mom, and their audience were regular moms. And they said, we would like you to come and just explain your coupon thing on TV. Okay, let's get real for a second. I have been a mother of toddlers and preschoolers. I just wore jeans and sweatshirts every day. I didn't even own a purse anymore. This was to go to New York City and go on live TV was terrifying. But the other side of me says, but you're going to get like 5 or 6 minutes of free exposure on national TV. Are you going to pass that up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So finally, the one who talked me off the ledge was my brother. And my brother said, what are you so afraid of? They're not going to ask you about anything but grocery coupons.
Right.
I mean, they're not going to ask you what I think of the crisis in the Middle East. They're going to ask you about your topic.
Right. Yes. And what you know about already. Yeah. Yep.
And so many of us as women were like, oh, I can't put myself out there. Wait a second. We all have something. Mm-hmm. Everybody has something that they love and that they know all about, and that maybe they talk about too much, and everyone knows it's your thing. Surely there is a way we can each figure out how to use that to help someone else.
Yes. So along that line, how would you, and you used prayer. I think you've also talked about in the book about like thinking about what your strengths are. So like you said, your passions, what do you always talk to people about? What are those things you think about? What do you obsess about? What touches your heart, right? What are those ways that a mom that's listening to this, if they're thinking, gosh, I really want to do this or this or this, but I just don't know how to get started, and all of those things, how do you sort of narrow that down or figure that out for yourself?
Well, and that's why I wrote this book, again, thinking back to my sons, because I heard that speaker and she was great with that one motivating sentence, but there was she didn't have a follow-up program or anything like that. And I thought, okay, I wanted to kind of lay out a roadmap. Like your first step is, like you said, I call it, what is your superpower?
Yes.
We all have something. So, and that's 35,000 feet. So for example, you might say, yeah, I guess I'm good at, let's see, I used to be a communications trainer. Okay, so I'm good at telecommunications training. Okay, back up a little bit. You're good at teaching. Okay,
Mm.
back up a little bit more. You're good at communicating. Okay, now
Mhm.
as we get broader, there are more possibilities.
Mhm.
You might take for granted that you're really good at listening to people and talking to people,
Mhm.
but you might not understand that. So I think it's good to ask our friends, ask our family members,
Hmm.
what would you say my strength is? Well, you're really good at listening to people.
Mhm.
Well, how many, mentorship programs? I mean, how many opportunities would there be to step in and help people with this wonderful ability of listening to others?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be what you think is a tangible skill. It just sometimes we're blind to what we're so good at because it comes so easily to us.
Oh, well, that's well said. Yeah, right. It's so
Yeah,
obvious to us. We don't think, oh, people don't like to do that, or they aren't comfortable doing that, or whatever, right?
right. And
Mm-hmm.
then I call it paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step for me was when we are like thinking in our head, whether faith is important to you or not is not the issue. The issue is if you are being intentional with this thought. So if your thought is, okay, you know what? I'm good at this.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to start paying attention to where I might be able to plug that in my immediate area. I want to say it's super important for me when I was home with my two kids.
Mm-hmm.
I had made a big decision, a big sacrifice to be home with my kids. I wasn't about to give that up.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is out there that would fit in the context of the life I love?
Mm-hmm.
I could have said, oh, I should be teaching grocery coupon workshops all around the country, and I'll travel and leave my kids home with my husband, and I'll travel. That wouldn't have worked in my life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The website out of my house worked for my life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
on my off time. So, paying attention. Would I have noticed in the church bulletin the food appeal had I not been really paying attention, looking around and saying, where can I plug this in? Where can I plug this in?
Right. It was on your heart already. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think people are going to be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're kind of on the hunt for that, what will
Mm-hmm.
jump out at you?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I also love how, like your story about the local radio, promo that happened, and then you sort of parlayed that into the local TV, and then that went national. I mean, like you were looking for things that maybe weren't conventional, or at the time things have changed a little bit since back then because of social media. That is a
Right.
big a way to amplify in a different way that we didn't necessarily have in the beginning times for either of us. And we may have done something different, but anyway, I guess those sort of looking under the rocks that you wouldn't normally expect to look for, right? Be creative.
Well, and today you make such a good point because it's more accessible to all of us today to be able to get your message out there. And again, I'm a dinosaur, but when I was starting, there was no Facebook, there was no
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, there was no YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
All
Right.
right. So today, if a mom has an idea, how wonderful that from your home with your phone, you can make videos, you can do a podcast, you
Mm-hmm.
can do a blog, you can have a great Instagram page, you can have a great, whatever your medium is, you have full access to it at zero cost from your home. How wonderful is that?
Right. Yes. Yeah. It does make things so much different. Yeah, I think about like your story about going to New York and being on the show and all that. I mean, I did the same thing with my book way back when, and I got to go to New York, and it was really scary but exciting, and all those things. And now I just think, how much different would it have been the way I found people to be in my book and all of the things like that? Now that you've got this different resource to leverage through social media, I did
Right.
actually find a couple way back in the early days. A couple of mine did come through like tweets, like Twitter. I actually found
Oh,
people to be in my book through Twitter, which is so crazy, but I don't
that's
know.
funny.
Yeah, isn't it? But anyway, that's great. So I another thing that I thought was really profound, you've got in the book a quote from the founder of Tom's, and it's just,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money, or if you could do whatever you wanted with your time? How would that open up things for someone? So, for the listeners, just think about like, what are those things that if you didn't have to, like, you said, if you didn't have to have a career around it, what would you do?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, that every successful advisor, like Steve Jobs, anyone giving advice, they always say, just do what you love. So for example, there was no way to make money with my website when I started, because the advertisers that are on websites today didn't exist yet. So back when I started, it wasn't even a question. I didn't have the temptation of making money because there was no way to do it. But my metric was how many people are using this, how many people are donating food to charity. And of course, the real metric is when you start hearing from real people via email or however they're communicating, and you just feel like, okay, this is making a difference somewhere.
Yeah.
But you can be surprised. I mean, the strategy of so many initiatives like Facebook, like Twitter, they didn't have any advertising at all in the early days. Their goal was just to reach as many people as possible, to get as big as possible, worry about making the money later. So if you have, like, putting out good content, if you have a mission, if you have a dream, it's not that it would never make money, just worry about it later. Because if it takes off, there will always be an opportunity once it's big enough. And the funny thing is that I was so broken. Now let's go back. I was so brokenhearted about the IRS agent saying no. And once my, whole concept in the website did go national, and once it got lots of traffic, then Google had invented a ad product. It was super easy for someone like me, just threw it on the website and forgot about it. And the Google code would read what your website was about, and then it would deliver ads that made sense for your website. I never had to have a sales force. I never had to try to sell ads to anybody. It was so easy. But because of the sheer number of people we had, those Google ads made so much more money than government grants ever would have.
Nice.
And we grew much faster. We never would have been able to afford the level of talent that I was able to hire eventually with government grants. I didn't have to spend any time writing grant applications. So my accountant, that same accountant, he would say to me every year, the best thing that ever happened to you is getting rejected by the IRS. And truly, in his 30 years of practice, I was the only client he'd ever had who was rejected by the IRS.
Wow. And probably one of the most successful that he ever worked with.
And, so when we get knocked, this is why when we get knocked on our knees, sometimes we just have to say, you know what? We don't know the rest of the story. This is only one piece of it. It's easy for me to say that because I'm looking back over 23 years. And I'm going to go, back again. For me, it worked in my life with my 3 and 5-year-old. And I did say to my sons recently in their 20s, I said, you guys, I'm sorry if I neglected you or didn't pay enough attention to you when I was so busy doing this Coupon Mom thing. They both looked at me like deer in the headlights. They had no idea what I was talking about. And my son said, oh, Mom, just what every kid in high school wants, more attention from his mother. So we beat ourselves up over our parenting, and we're just making it up.
Yeah. Oh, well, I love that. I love that idea of just, if someone's listening and they're thinking about these ideas and they're thinking they're so hard and there's so many things to think about, that you really just need to open yourself up to, what is possible. Maybe it's not going to be the way you think it's going to be, right? Like you just said, you thought you were going to be a 501c3, you ended up not, and had much more success. So as someone thinks through, like, what could I do? Just keep an open mind, I think, and keep looking and keep thinking and keep, talking to people, right? Like your friends and people, you never know who has connections to things that you can't even think of right now. Right.
That's right. I called it pivotal people, because when I looked at my story over 23 years, you see all the people who came into the story. So you might not even be a person who starts something, but when you start paying attention, you might see a person who has started something, who needs you, who needs your particular skill.
Right.
Because when I looked at my story, there were 4 people specifically. Had they not stepped into the story, it never would have taken off nationally. Extremely pivotal people. And the funny thing is that, of course, I reached out to each one of them and I wrote chapters about them and I share the chapters with them. Not one of them realized how pivotal they were.
Oh.
Because they're like, well, that was no big deal. What I did. No, what you did, like not just changed my life, but hopefully people who benefited. And I do have to throw something in, and we will talk about this, I'm sure. But yes, our website made more money but today we actually give grants.
Oh.
So had you been a 501c3, but we don't give grants to 501c3s. We give grants to people who are not 501c3s. Like little people, like people who have a dream, who are starting something, like me, a mom. I share the story in the book that when I first started this with the 3 and 5-year-old, no money, but you do have expenses. So I started this on dial-up internet. I told you that. So when I was eating my yogurt one day, on the lid of the yogurt, there was a contest. And it was an essay contest for people who were starting charitable projects. And the prize was $1,000. So I entered, and I was probably the only one who entered. I won, and I got $1,000. And I felt like that was $1 million. And I bought my first computer, and I upgraded my internet to DSL, which was a little faster than dial-up.
Right.
But I'll tell you what really mattered. And I still have it. I found it the other day. What mattered was the letter that the company sent to me as why they picked my project and why they thought it was worthwhile.
Oh.
And that I call affirmation. And so this book, I already said, this book deal I got was quite a surprise. I'm super thankful for it. It's with one of my favorite publishers, Nelson Books, and they gave me an advance, which is they give you money and you don't have to give it back. Let me just put it that way. And I didn't expect it. So all of the money, we're using all of the money to give what I call Imagine More grants to people who are just like the yogurt company, people who are starting things, but they could use a little bit of money. So our grants, the tagline is, we give small grants to people with big dreams. And I have a page on my website where people can apply for grants. And I'll just tell you, we don't exactly have a selection committee. It's me sitting at my kitchen table, probably crying over these stories. But and then we have a Facebook group. So my dream is that we would have a group of dreamers, and we could perhaps connect maybe by Zoom workshops. I have experts who can come in and teach things. Perhaps we can meet in person. Perhaps we can have mentoring phone calls, all kinds of connections, because I learned in my journey that connections made all the difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. What a great way to sort of pass on, pass along what you benefited from for others, to just amplify again that benefit for people. That's fantastic. And I'm sure that just keeps growing when you do that kind of thing, when you plant those seeds. I believe that God just rewards us that way. So that I think that's great.
And there is nothing more inspiring than being with the dreamer.
Yes.
When people are at the beginning of their dream, it's just so exciting. So that's where I am I just want to be a part of that if I can be.
Oh, that's great. Well, hopefully someone listening will be inspired and possibly look this up. So speaking of that, how do people find you? How do they find the book? And how would they, if they were interested in this grant program, what would they do there?
Okay. So the book is sold everywhere. So any online site.
We'll have links in the show notes, of course, too.
Sure. And my website is my name, stephanienelson.com. And you go there and there's a tab that says Imagine More. If you go to the Imagine More page, you'll find the grant application and our Facebook group. And it's a private Facebook group. So I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We'll
great. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm so happy that you were part of our 100th episode.
And congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, excellent. Well, we'll have all the links in the show notes for everyone to find you. And again, so appreciate your time. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Mary Jo Tinlin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler,
on Instagram and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.